thank you all for showing up, even though the wonders of a single track conference is you have absolutely no choice. Well, I suppose you could go sit in the other room. All right, cool. So before we start, I need to give a quick disclaimer. The views expressed in this talk are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of my employer. All right, so hello there. My name's Gilbert. My day job is being a senior tech lead manager on the client engineering team at Airbnb. So a senior TLM is either the best or worst, depending on your point of view, of half senior manager and half senior staff engineer. So I have written several open source tools over the years, including Crypt, the file escrow tool, the MacAdmin's OS query extension, and now very sadly defunct Imager. I miss imaging, sorry. All right, so I'm on the board for MacAdmin's open source. We do things like supporting the SOFA feed and signing Monkey. So running MacAdmin's open source isn't free. We have the not inconsiderable cost for the hosting and bandwidth for SOFA in particular. So if you use SOFA or find it useful, find having a code signed Monkey or OS query extension useful, or even use any of our OS query tables, please consider making a small donation to help cover our costs. So the board have been covering basically all the costs ourselves because we really believe in what we're doing. So the community stepping up and helping us out would be lovely. And finally, I am a testicular cancer survivor and MDOYVR fundraiser. So far, together we have raised over $50,000. That goes towards funding research and awareness campaigns for a whole host of men's health issues, including testicular cancer and prostate cancer. So if you find this talk useful in any way, please consider donating. All right, so let's get into it. Glad that didn't pop up there. Sorry, my VS Code just asked me to update. All right, so let's get into it. You're a MacAdmin. You're probably doing this for a while, right? You've built systems, you've automated boring stuff, you've solved hard problems, maybe even mentored junior people. You know a way around this stuff, right? But now you're asking yourself, what's next? So if you've looked at the org chart, you might have noticed that it looks like there's a bit of a glass ceiling looming over you. You go from engineer, senior engineer, and then what? Manager? So at many organizations, the career path from engineer ends up in management. If that's a goal of yours, that's great. You don't need to listen anymore. But management isn't for everybody. The sad fact is that in a lot of places, people are forced to move into management if they want to progress. And they're forced to move into management without being told the big secret about being a manager. Managing people is a completely different job to being an engineer. Some engineers are good people managers. Some engineers are absolutely terrible managers. The same as some managers are terrible engineers. If being a manager isn't the route you want to take, well, what else is there? So for the observant amongst you, you won't be shocked to learn that the next step on the leadership ladder is a staff engineer. But what is a staff engineer? What makes them different from senior engineers? So the big shift is in scope and in impact. A staff engineer is thinking about the long game, not just the next sprint or the next project, but the next year, or even the next 3 years. You're setting technical direction. You're shaping systems, not just building features. You're identifying cross-team risks, defining architecture patterns, and driving alignment at a higher level. You're expected to think bigger, wider, and longer term than the rest of the team, and to help others execute towards that vision. So what else differentiates a staff engineer from other people? So let's talk about a mindset shift that is absolutely critical if you want to move into a staff role. See, as engineers, we're trained to solve problems, right? Something breaks, we fix it. There's friction, we automate it. That's great, that's valuable, but at the staff level, that is the absolute baseline. The real shift is learning to become a problem finder. So that means looking beyond your immediate tasks or team. That means looking for patterns, for gaps, for inefficiencies. Things that might not be broken yet, but they're going to be. Things nobody else has noticed or has the perspective to frame as a problem. And then critically, knowing which ones are actually worth solving. So not every weird problem or outdated workflow needs a fix. But part of your job is knowing which ones do and having the influence to do something about it. So don't just wait for work to be handed to you. Like, get curious, get proactive. Ask, what's slowing people down? What are the gaps between teams? What's fragile or scaling badly? What's a security risk that no one else has flagged yet? Like, that's how you stop reacting and you start leading. All right, so another hallmark of a great staff engineer is that they are a force multiplier. Your impact shouldn't just come from the code you personally write. In fact, the more senior you get, the less of your impact should be directly tied to your commits. Your job becomes making other people more effective. That could mean unblocking a teammate who's stuck. It could mean writing clear technical documentation that helps other people make good decisions when you're not in the room. It might be mentoring someone so they level up faster, or influencing architecture so your whole org avoids a bad decision. You might lead by building shared tooling, or even just creating a clear mental model that helps your team reason about a complex system. The best staff engineers leave behind a wake of better engineers, smoother systems, and smarter decisions. So, you might be sitting there thinking, all this stuff like coaching people, unblocking teammates, driving alignment, like, that sounds a lot like being a manager. And guess what? You're not wrong. There is overlap. Both roles require leadership, influence, communication, and vision. But the how and the what are very different. Managers focus on people, right? Hiring, performance reviews, career growth, team health. Their tool set's organizational. Staff engineers focus on systems, architecture, long-term technical direction. Their tool set's technical. Both are leadership roles. But staff engineers lead without authority. You're not someone's boss. You still need to earn trust, drive consensus, and move the org forward. So this is how I think mature organizations should think about the two tracks. Management and technical leadership aren't a hierarchy. They're parallel paths. Staff engineer isn't a stepping stone into management. It's its own destination. So not every org gets this right. Some still see management as the real path to leadership. But that's changing, and it's up to us as a community to keep pushing for that recognition. You can be a leader without managing people, and staff engineering is proof of that. All right, so maybe by now you're thinking, this sounds pretty interesting. I want to operate at that level. But how do I actually get there? So let's talk about what separates a senior engineer from a staff engineer in practice. What are the attributes that actually matter? So I'm going to walk through a few, and yes, some of them are going to sound a bit soft or maybe even a little managery. I'm sorry. But trust me, like, every one of these is going to have a huge impact on your ability to lead without authority and drive meaningful outcomes. All right, so obviously you need to know your tech. As a staff engineer, you are the tech boss. But what does that really mean? So at the staff level, you are expected to be the expert. Maybe not in absolutely everything, but definitely in your area. You should be the go-to person for your domain. Like, whether it's macOS internals, the MDM protocol, software deployment, endpoint security, whatever it is. But expertise today isn't enough. Like, you need to stay current. For us, that probably means keeping up to the latest platform changes, means banging on the beta of macOS the second it comes out, watching WWDC like a hawk. Like, what? Did I? Sorry. It means like staying on top of changes in identity, networking, security, reading between the lines of Apple's often vague documentation. So we work in an ecosystem where we don't get roadmaps, thanks Apple. So part of your job is going to be to read tea leaves. Being technically strong is what gives you the platform to influence, because people trust engineers who know what they're talking about. All right, so you got the technical depth. Now what? Now you need to communicate it. And I don't just mean writing clear documentation or speaking up in meetings, although both are pretty important. What I mean is learning to tell a story. Staff engineers spend a lot of time explaining things to engineers, to managers, to execs, and you need to tailor the story every single time. If you're working with a junior engineer, you're breaking down complex systems in a way that makes them approachable and actionable. If you're pitching a project to a VP, you're not talking about APIs or MDMs or build systems. Like, you're talking about business value, time saved, risk reduced, strategic alignment. It's the same problem, but it's a different message. So let's say you are proposing an iOS app that's gonna send notifications to end users and you need it to integrate with Google Context-Aware Access. Like, you've got your design doc written, you've decided on your architecture, you've got sign off from security, you're all good, great, that's gonna make sense to your engineers. But if you send that same doc to an exec, chances are they're either gonna be confused by all the APIs, the APNSs and the client states, or even worse, they're gonna be completely bored and uninterested. So you need to speak their language, right? They want to know what the impact's going to be. What's the improvement to user experience going to be? What will this do to our support ticket numbers? Like, impact is what gets you attention here. So now, let's talk about opportunity. When you're early in your career, you're mostly handed projects. Someone tells you what needs doing and you just do it. At the senior level, you're probably starting to suggest projects. Maybe you see inefficiencies and you write a script or build a new workflow. But as staff, right, sometimes the work is not going to look glamorous at first. Sometimes it shows up in a total mess. Like, it's political, unscoped, underfunded. Like, and your job is to see the potential in it. So let's talk about a hypothetical project. You've been asked to automate the setup of developer laptops. You've spent time talking to owners of dev tools to gather requirements. You've written design docs and you've done a ton of work to get it implemented, and now it's in production. You've cut down what was a 30 or 40 step process down to just a handful. You're feeling pretty good about yourself at this point. You're feeling pretty happy. Then this sort of feedback drops in. And it's not just one paragraph, as the intro suggests. It's at least 2 pages long. And you're like, okay, that's annoying. Someone's taking a crap over all my hard work. You're probably feeling a bit upset about this, right? But then you realise who it came from. It's someone immensely important. You're now in full-on defence mode. You cannot ignore this. You have to say something. So you start writing down your defence. You say, well, we've not actually received any negative feedback. And the complaints you had about the docs, well, that's someone else's problem, sorry. So let's take a step back and think about how this exec is going to take this response. Like, after all, they've spent time to write literally 2 pages about this. So they obviously care about the problem, even if they are a bit frustrated with it. What you're basically saying here is, we fixed everything we can, and the rest isn't our fault. So at best, the exec is going to shrug their shoulders, not have a particularly good opinion of you or your team, and move on. At worst, they're going to continue to insist your solution's the wrong one, that your team is wrong, and your team don't know what they're doing. So how can you turn this into an opportunity? How can you cover yourself and your team in glory? So, it turns out some of the items they raised have already been fixed in a late release. So rather than just saying that, like, you can acknowledge that, yes boss, you are absolutely right. Highlight what you did to fix their issues. And if they have other unresolved points, like, be specific about what the next steps are, when you expect to address them. So validating what they say paints you in a much better light. Giving specifics about when you're going to fix it makes you look even better. But the real opportunity here is to crowd the other teams responsible for the other, like, 60–70% of the complaints and make them fix things. Like, it's honestly not a ton of work to sit in a meeting and to even explain what they're missing and get them to commit to a date to fix it. But what do you get out of it? So in this fictional VP's eyes, you are the person who got this problem sorted for them. You are someone who owns outcomes, not just deliverables. You are now the hero of the story. So, in that scenario, how could you get those teams that owned those crappy docs to do what you ask them. Like obviously you got the weight of this VP behind you, right? But they probably have 100 other things to do that are also ultimately wanted by other very important people. Like, how do you get them to work on what you want? It's not like you're their manager, right? You have no formal authority over them. So what I'm talking about is influencing without authority. So influencing without authority is as much as an art as it is a science. So it all starts out with the points I raised earlier. Like, you've got recognized tech skills, you're able to tailor your message to its audience, and you're able to find the opportunity and problems. You've also been building your relationships as well. You can't wait until you need something to reach out to people. So you've built a wide network in advance. You know who to talk to on other teams, who owns what systems, how to get things unstuck in your org. You've been interacting with senior leaders. You've been building your brand as someone they respect and trust to get things done. And by talking to those people, you now know which levers you can pull, and more importantly, how hard. Like perhaps you know that one manager won't ever get their team to do a stroke of work unless their director tells them to. Or perhaps another will only listen to a particular engineer on their team. So you need to start seeing your ideas at the bottom first. Like, so for more on this, I strongly recommend reading this article, which is where the QR code will take you. It's absolutely fantastic, and I refer people to it all the time. Okay, this sounds so managery. I think I might be sick, but I'm sorry. But a key attribute of a staff engineer is focusing on what's best for the business. So it might be cool to build out a custom tool to do something, but you need to have a real justification to do so. You know, if there's an off-the-shelf solution that works for you, why are you suggesting to build one? And sometimes it all just comes down to reframing the problem that you want to solve to align with business needs. So let's say you want to migrate to a new MDM because you dislike the UI of your current one. That's not a business need. The new one might be more expensive, so you can't use that as a reason. But if you spend a little time calculating how long it takes you to make the average change, and then multiply it by how often you make changes, then you've got a more compelling business case. So another example. Let's say there's a bug in macOS that stops a small portion of your company from working. But that small portion is working on something absolutely vital for your next product launch. Like, obviously you want to keep people secure, so you want to keep them updated. So maybe you just allow the entire fleet to install the update, but just ask these few people, just don't install that, please. Or if you look at it from a business perspective, you can't take the risk of these users not being able to work. So perhaps you can't reliably identify them either. So you decide to hold back the update from the entire fleet until the product launch is over. So far, we've talked about technical skill, communication, leadership, and business focus. But there is another piece that often gets overlooked, and that's community. So at a staff level, your reputation matters. Not just inside your company, but outside of it too. Why? Because your visibility adds weight to your ideas. Because being part of a broader professional network gives you insight, gives you inspiration, and allies. And because sometimes the best solutions come from people you have never met, until you connect with them at a conference or online maybe. But also, because this community needs leadership. The next generation of Mac admins need role models. They need mentors, maintainers, and speakers. Staff level engineers give back. They contribute. They help raise the bar, not just for themselves, but for everyone else too. So that ties directly into this, building your brand. And that doesn't mean becoming an influencer on TikTok or Instagram, whatever the people are using these days. It means sharing what you know, owning your perspective, being visible in your domain. So that might look like speaking at a conference like this one. It might look like writing a blog post or a case study. Maybe it's sharing tools or code you built. Or maybe it's going on a podcast or joining in with a community meetup. So let's say all of this is resonating with you. You're technically strong. You care about your craft. You've started thinking about longer term problems. Maybe you're already doing some staff level work without the title. But the question is, like, how do you make the leap? I mean, there's no checklist, there's no magic formula. But there are a few things that helped me get there, and I've seen it work for other people too. So one of the most valuable things I did was ask to be invited to meetings that were, frankly, above my pay grade. I didn't go to speak though, I went to listen. When you're in the room where decisions get made, like planning meetings, roadmap reviews, cross-functional working groups, that sort of stuff, you start to understand how leaders think. You learn what matters to them, what trade-offs they're making. And once you understand that, you can start to frame your own work in ways that lands with them. You can see how a patching strategy connects with risk mitigation, how automation connects to operational efficiency, how device health ties into compliance and business continuity. You also start spotting gaps, like problems you are uniquely positioned to solve. And you'll know how to pitch them. So if you're not sure how to ask when you want to get into these meetings, just keep it really simple. I'm trying to understand how decisions get made so I can better align my work with your goals. Would it be okay if I sat in on this? And eventually, you won't even have to ask. You'll get the invite because people will see that you think beyond your role, that you belong in the room. So another important step, if you want to grow into a staff engineer role, is start asking leaders what's on their mind, literally. Go to a manager, a director, someone adjacent to your org and ask, what problems are keeping you up at night? What are you worried about over the next 6 to 12 months? Where do you see risk or friction in the organization? Why do this? Because staff engineers don't just solve technical problems, they solve organizational ones. And the biggest, most strategic problems aren't always written down in Jira. Sometimes they're lurking in an exec's mental backlog. They might not even be fully formed yet, just vague concerns about scale, complexity, risk, or reliability. And when you ask leaders what they're worried about, a few things start to happen. You get insight into the bigger picture. You build trust, because you're showing that you care about more than just your own backlog. And sometimes, you get handed a challenge that no one else has claimed, and you get to shape the solution from scratch. And that's how high-impact projects start. That's how you get noticed. That's how you earn sponsorship for a promotion. Because when you solve a problem that matters to a leader, that leader then becomes an advocate for you. So don't wait for perfect clarity or permission. Start with a conversation, start with curiosity, start by asking what keeps them up at night. And finally, you need to learn to become a leader. And let's be honest, for a lot of us in this field, it doesn't come naturally. It certainly didn't for me. Earlier in my career, I was all about getting things done the right way. I was focused, I was opinionated, and honestly, I was an asshole. I thought being right was the goal. But I wasn't thinking about how I made people I work with feel. So, true story here. In one of my early performance reviews, my manager included a bit of feedback from our support team. They said that they were too intimidated to ask me questions directly. So instead, they would ask them via MacAdmin Slack. Because that felt safer for them. And that kind of stung, to be honest with you. But it was a turning point. I realized that being technically good wasn't enough. At staff level, you're not just solving problems, you're shaping how other people solve problems. You're not just executing work, you're influencing the entire direction of that work. And you can't do any of that effectively if people don't want to engage with you. I had to learn to listen, to explain, to empathize, to support others and not just correct them. And that's what leadership actually is, right? It's making space for others, not just making space for yourself. And I'll leave you with this quote. This is something my manager said to me when he delivered that same performance review. And it's stuck with me ever since. You cannot be a leader without any followers. And that might sound pretty obvious, but it is incredibly important. You can't be a leader just because you got the job title, or the experience, or the strongest opinions in the room. You have to earn trust. You have to make people want to follow you. Not because they have to, but because they believe in you. Because they believe that them doing work on the things that you think are important is worth spending their time on. And that means you can't be an arsehole. You have to be the kind of person people want to work with, want to listen to, and want to build something with. So that's leadership, and that's the part that turns a great individual contributor into a staff engineer. So that's it. We are hiring a security person with a focus on endpoint security. obviously because they're a security person, and a global head of IT support right now. If you're interested in learning more about either of those roles, please come have a chat with me. You can find me on these places. I have a rarely updated website, and you can email me at my very cryptic and hard to guess email address. If you found this talk useful in any way, please consider donating to the MDOYVR Foundation and help save some of the lives of the people you might very well be seeing next to you right now. Thank you.